I don't really believe in absolutes. If you have one way of doing it, it's not going to work across a lot of different industries or verticals.
Yeah, and that's a course thing too, just or really anything, a conference, a webinar. If someone's like this is the hack, the magic trick that always works. It's just anyone that's good that actually does they do a case study. This worked for us most of the time. Best
Right.
practice. They use all these qualifiers to stay away from absolutes because anyone
Right.
actually in the industry, it's like there is no absolute. Campaign to campaign,
Right.
anything. There's no perfect thing.
Right. And that's why, like to me, the core fundamental framework of like how you approach it and what your strategy is more important than the actual setup itself because it makes such a difference on the ground. As you optimize in real time based on the data.
Yeah, and that's one of your most recent thing, Paid Search Association. That webinar is kind of
Yeah.
prepping for strategies in 2024. I really like that. A lot of good stuff. We have predictions for 2024, and people are doing kind of summaries of all the updates. But
Right.
I liked your detailed breakdown, not predictions, not kind of what you'd like to see, but it was really good takeaways and the highly technical stuff. This is what you should do in Google Ads in 2024. So that's what I wanted to kind of dig
Yeah.
into more.
For sure, for sure. I mean, it's like it all comes back to that same thing. It's like, what type of campaign should I use? How should I set it up? And the answer is so different for every business. So like I try to kind of share my thoughts on how we approach that. Like when do we use shopping versus performance max? Do we use both? Do we set it up like this? Do we set it up like that? So it's like helping people understand my framework so that they can think about it in a similar way.
Yeah, it's real loose format to this, by the way.
Yeah,
There's no PowerPoint. So
for sure.
you mentioned the framework. We don't have to pull it up on the screen or anything,
Yeah.
but let's explain that framework a little bit. I think that's 2024, and that's future proof. Like, how specifically do you dive in for a client or in-house or business owner, whoever's listening? What does that framework look like specifically?
Yeah, so I think like for me, being that I've been doing this so long and I've seen so much change, I used to be very resistant to it. Like for years, I was like not a single broad match in any of my campaigns ever.
Yeah,
Um,
that was a
but I've
beginner
seen,
thing to do.
yeah, yeah. I mean, and I've had long conversations with our agency Google reps where they're like trying to convince me to use smart bidding or broad match, and I'm like, no, never.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I've I've come to realize that it works, and it'll work a lot better than me sitting there trying to beat the system. And so we lean into it, but I think like that's a big piece of future-proofing your campaigns is having an open mind and not trying to hack the system and beat the system because like the smart bidding algorithms, for example, it has access to, I think Google says, 1,000 plus signals in real time.
Yeah.
And if you go to manual bidding, there's only about, I think, fewer than 10 signals that you can actually put bid adjustments on, location, time of day, audiences, things of that nature. So like just by that, you're outgunned. So like, the first piece of future-proofing your campaigns is understanding and accepting that the future is automation. But again, that doesn't mean every single campaign should use smart bidding. It becomes a question of what's best for my business, what's best to drive the business results that I'm looking for. And that's, so having that in mind helps you figure out, okay, now what do I do? So like, for let's say a service provider, they're looking to generate leads with a Google search campaign. A lot of those small budget campaigns will still use manual bidding, phrase match keywords, really tightly control which ads show up for what keywords. But as you get to another level of scale and volume, you do want to layer on the broad match keywords and lean into smart bidding if you have enough of a data signal that the system can utilize it to improve the performance of your campaigns. So it's like thinking about things in that way. And then there's a similar question like for e-commerce businesses, should I use shopping? Should I use performance max? And there's no one answer. it's like, okay, what kind of product are you selling? If you're selling digital cameras, for example, or kitchen appliances, a very highly commoditized product with a lot of search volume, you probably don't want to touch Performance Max yet. Um, Standard shopping with smart bidding could likely work really well because there's so much pent-up demand. All you got to do is capture it. Whereas on the flip side, if you're selling maybe a private label, your own brand product, more of an impulse purchase, fashion, visual products, things like that, Performance Max can work really well because you've got that visual component and you can, capture search, but also do some prospecting and retargeting. And, so it's like there's so many different ways to do it. You got to really think about what your goal is and how you can best achieve it with the tools available to you today.
Yeah, and we are talking about different industries a little bit, and at this moment, again, depending on when you watch this, you can always adjust it. But we've got January coming up, and that's a lot of New Year's resolutions things, and that's one you have to take a step back, and this is just future proofing it, just marketing 101, kind of like where would people see this, and what type of people would respond to it. Let's just use weight loss. That's the easiest thing.
Right.
January is coming up. It's like, well, who wants to, or not necessarily weight loss, might be putting on muscle or training. It's like who's into
Right.
training, who wants to exercise more. And you look at that Performance Max, it's like, do you care if it's on Gmail, YouTube, banner ads, search, the
Right.
discovery feed? It's like, no, it doesn't really
Yeah.
matter at all. It's like, well, then great, put your fitness thing, your supplement, your gym,
Right.
fashion, running shoes. There's so many things like, do you care where the ad is? No, I just want sales.
Right. Exactly. And so that's the beauty of Performance Max is that it can see and know so much about the individual user that it can target people that it believes would be interested, whether, like you said, for weight loss, supplements, things of that nature. But it also ties in that search intent. You will show up on the shopping side. You will show up on the search side. And, if your product or brand is doing really well on, let's say, meta ads on paid social, chances are you can pull the same creative and dump it into Performance Max and it'll go into YouTube Shorts, it'll go into all those places you mentioned and it can do really well there.
Yeah, learning a lot on paid social, and I've seen this is coming up more and more that people should spread their budget around because all Facebook or all Google with all this AI and to getting in front of people depending on where they are, it's like you could learn from paid social or SEO or organic social or whatever it
Right.
is. I mean, lean on your SEO team, your content team, your email. These are all different specialists, but
Right.
and kind of crisscross with that. Performance Max really broke the ice with that, and then Facebook or Meta ads, they have their Advantage Plus, and they're leaning into that,
Right.
and that's kind of Performance Max. Just showed all of Facebook. Here's some signals, kind of. It's sort of a beta, but you can kind of do signals, and it's like a Performance Max. And we've had clients to where you can't really pinpoint like who again, let's just use fitness, who's into fitness. It's like, well, anybody 18 to 100. So it's like, okay, Facebook, I'll give you a big budget, find people that want to whatever, want to exercise
Right.
more and for the new year. It's like, well, that's anybody.
Right. And that's the thing is like you can sit there and try to build your own audiences and do the targeting, but why? Like let the system do the heavy lifting for you and you focus, on the overall strategy, the merchandising, the messaging, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and we had that another example. It was kind of a business opportunity thing, not the cheesy ones, like a real one, where you go to a seminar. It was real estate, and it's like, well, who wants to get into real estate and real estate investing, or realtors or Airbnbs.
Right.
That market goes up and down, but we had a legitimate one, but it was kind of, we used to segment it. We got, okay, here's 25 to 30, maybe it's a side hustle. Here's 30 to 40, maybe it's a new career, 40 to 60 or
Right.
65. Do it while you're retired, flip houses kind of to help your retirement. And it was so heavily segmented. And then we got the feedback from the client. It's like, our seminars and our masterclass and our workshops and all this, we have a huge range of people here. It's like
Right.
why are we segmenting it so much? It's like I don't know, just let it run. Here's a weekend
Yeah.
workshop, learn real estate or whatever it is. It's like just let people decide whoever
Yeah.
wants to sign up and buy it.
Yeah, and I think that that's becoming more of a thing is that people are realizing that the creative and the messaging becomes a form of targeting. If you put the right message out, certain people will resonate with it and they'll click on it. Everyone else will kind of scroll right past it. So that works to your advantage. And again, the system is going to try its best to place it in front of someone it believes is likely to take your conversion action. So, and it is true for both Facebook, Instagram, Google, YouTube, all that stuff. It's you gotta lean into what works.
Yeah, and that kind of going back on that example, that over segmenting, that's kind of the way we used to do it. And unless there's some very specific reason, like going back to that other one, maybe financial planning, you people in retirement right now, it's like you can
Right.
segment that. But a lot of them we've been switching to if it's a financial service or investments or the retirement thing, just list everything you do. And it's retirement
Yeah.
planning, getting ready. That could be people in their 20s, don't start planning now, or people in their 30s or their 40s. Hey, you're way behind. Or people currently in retirement, let's get the most out of it. Just make
Right.
this long kind of retirement investment financial services thing, and then you don't have to segment it as much, and usually it will work better if you can target a wide range of people anyway.
Right. Right. I think it's like there's definitely I don't like to use absolutes for the reason is that there are some industries where I prefer to use audience targeting, where a lot of our B2B stuff, for example, if we're running a campaign on Facebook and Instagram, I find that you'll find better lead quality if you're targeting lookalikes of your existing customers than if you use just more broad targeting. So, there is a case for everything, but I tend to lean more towards automation when we can.
Yeah, and that's kind of getting ready for 2024, leaning into the
Yeah.
automation. I mean, what are some ways people can shift over to that? And if you're not used to automation or it's not working, you've got manual, what's a kind of 2024 stuff to adjust?
Yeah, so I think like something I've been telling people is like you have to think about how the role, the job is shifting. It used to be we were responsible for optimizing the campaign itself. I think the job has changed to a point where our job is instead of optimizing the campaign itself, it's more about guiding the algorithm, giving it the right data. If you feed the system good data, it'll feed you good results. And so what that means on a campaign level is like making sure that your targeting is tight. So for something like Performance Max, which does its own targeting, you give the system audience signals, tell it who you believe your best customers are. For Performance Max in shopping, you want to make sure that your product data feed is fully optimized, has good titles, description, so that the system knows what keywords to target, and making sure that your tracking is working well. For e-commerce, you're tracking purchases, but for lead gen campaigns, you want to try to go a step deeper than just capturing leads. You want to try to connect your CRM, send sales data back to Google Ads so it knows what's driving real business outcomes, and basically just making sure the system has the right bid strategy and the right data to make bidding decisions in real time. And that's more important now than ever before. And I think like another piece of it that is often overlooked is your campaign structure, trying not to be too granular, allowing the system increased efficiency by having more condensed campaign structure, giving it more leeway of where to target who, and it's able to do better in those cases. Like I just looked at a campaign for an account audit. They had something like 300 search campaigns on a $10,000 budget, and it's
Yeah.
like what? Like how? It's like you're almost like you're holding the algorithm back from doing what it needs to do. And so I think like for me, it all comes back to structure and data and the bid strategies. Because if you get those pieces right, you don't need to be as busy with adjusting bids, keywords, things of that nature, the system should be able to do it on its own. Now, again, it doesn't mean like, don't look at your search terms and don't add negative keywords. Of course, you want to still do those things, but you'll likely not need to put as much effort into it.
Yeah, and going on the specific things on that, a lot of questions that come up. How do you start a brand new campaign? I mean, manual CPC to start or maximize conversions and then later do target
So,
CPA?
yeah,
People debate this a lot.
yeah, and there's a lot of different ways to do it. There's no one way that's like you have to do this, but typically if it's a search campaign, we like to start with manual CPC so we can very closely like regulate the overall, cost per click, traffic flow, very close, paying very close attention to the search terms. Typically we'll start that with phrase match. And then as you get data, I think Google's recommendation is 30 conversions over a 30-day period.
Yeah,
We'll try to switch to smart bidding, maximize conversions, target CPA. But for e-commerce brands, the goal really is to get to target ROAS as quickly as possible. And so like if you're on Performance Max, there is no manual bidding. So you'll either just, start with max conversions or max conversion value, which tells the system, spend my whole budget and get me as much conversions or revenue as possible. And like to me, I think about that as like my goal right now is just capture data, let the system see what works and what doesn't. Um, and it's less about like hoping for results on day one, more about building the foundation for, weeks 2, 3, 4 down the line. But you do have to be patient with it because like Performance Max has shown that like it could work really well out of the gate, but sometimes it might need a few weeks, like 3, 4, 5 weeks to really like hit its stride and gain momentum and hit a place of profitability. So it's like, yeah, I guess the simple version is start on manual or max conversions just to get traffic, get conversions, and then move to target CPA or target ROAS once you have enough data that the system can utilize.
makes sense. And I guess kind of following up on that, when the automation isn't doing what it's supposed to do, let's say you got target CPA, it's a lead gen kind of higher cost, maybe $50 is the target CPA, and it's at 100, it's at 200, and it's just stuck there. How do you fix that when the target CPA isn't hitting the target CPA?
So I think there's two approaches. One is to change the target, like move just back to max conversions or manual bids just to force it to spend more so that it gathers more data. In the short term, that might hurt performance, but for the long term, it should allow you to get enough data to see what works, what doesn't, and then come back down. But I think the flip side and a piece that is often overlooked is if that's a lead gen campaign, and my cost is so high, the first thing that I would do is test a new landing page and see if I can increase conversion rates. Because if you double your conversion rate, you just sliced your cost per lead in half.
Yeah.
And that's something a lot of people don't even think about because it's not even in the Google Ads interface, but it is really important, especially for lead gen stuff.
Yeah, and then same question for, if you've got a target ROAS, that one's a little trickier. It's percentage. Do you do 200%, 500%? Of course, you want to just put 1,000%, but you have to put a real number in there. Let's say you put
Yeah,
300%. That's a reasonable ROAS, especially with physical products. That's going to be maybe break even depending on your
right.
margins. I mean, how do you kind of mess with that system with e-commerce?
So, yeah, I mean it's a very similar approach. It's trying to get data so the system can do better, but the reality is that each industry sort of regulates itself. There are industries where you can bid at a 10x ROAS 1,000% and it will work. Like for example, digital cameras and kitchen appliances, those, retailers typically work on very thin margins, and that is something that makes sense for that industry. But if you're working in an industry where it's much more I guess, the margins are bigger and your competitors are going to be bidding with a 2x ROAS or a 3x ROAS, and you kind of have to be competitive with them in order to outbid them, outrank them. And so in those cases, you'll need to bid more aggressively. The hope is that if you have a better managed campaign and better fundamentals, you can still have profitable campaign. But again, I would encourage you to think outside of the Google Ads interface. So like if you're getting a 2x ROAS and you want to see a 3, and you feel like you've done everything you could in Google Ads, So go to your website or your products and think like, what can I do to increase my average order value or to increase my conversion rate, which will inherently increase your ROAS. And so those are things that you really have to think about as well.
Yeah, and I think that's still a landing page optimization thing. It's not quite the same with lead gen. You can swap them
Yeah,
out with something like a like an unbounce or whatever, where you the landing page building software and A/B testing.
right,
But I think you've got the upsells in the cart, or so,
right,
people also bought this stuff, which a
right.
Shopify or whatever can kind of automate. Or I've seen people even with fashion and all this stuff, you can customize it, or you get a unique color, or
Yeah,
you can do depending on what it is, a bulk order, which people didn't know. Hey, if you buy
right.
20, there's a discount. It's like, oh, I didn't even know that. You
Yeah,
can kind
yeah,
of upsell e-commerce too, and
yeah,
get a higher order value. So yeah, it's
right.
there's some stuff to manipulate on that for
Yeah,
sure.
and there's a lot you can do there, like free shipping over a certain threshold. I mean, the tricky
Yeah.
piece to keep in mind is that the more aggressively you push for a higher AOV, the likelihood you're also increasing your conversion rate. So you need to really find the balance of those two, and see what's most profitable for you. But, that's again on the website side. But if you jump back into your campaign, it's like there's so many things you can do. Like, for example, if you optimize your data feed, make the titles more keyword rich, make sure that you're assigning the right product taxonomy. Now you might be eligible to show in more auctions, more search volumes available to you. Maybe you won't need to bid as aggressively, and maybe, you'll start to see a higher return on ad spend. So it's like you got to look in the website, your product, your merchandising, your website. You got to look in Merchant Center, optimize to increase exposure. And then of course, within the campaign itself, optimizing whatever you can to improve actual performance there too. So you have to be more of a strategic marketer and less of just like, a media buyer.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. I mean, do you think if you're at 200 or 300% ROAS, do you just jump to a higher one and just set it to 7, or do you kind of inch up over weeks? Or I mean, because you don't want to just launch it with a
Right.
1,000% ROAS, or do you? I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, so I think it's like important to think about what your bid strategy and your bid target tells the system to do. I actually just published a Twitter thread and on LinkedIn of like, what's your mandate when you select a certain bid strategy? And so like target ROAS at 1,000, what you're telling the system is get me as close as possible to a 10 to 1 return on ad spend, and you can spend up to this amount to get there. But the first set of instructions for the system is get this result. And if it doesn't think it's going to get that result, it likely won't spend your budget. So if you set your target ROAS too high, you might not spend at all. You might not get a lot of traffic and definitely not a lot of conversions. So that's why, like in a lot of those cases, I'll lean on max conversions or max conversion value, where now you're giving the system a different set of instructions. You're telling it, spend my whole budget and get me as many conversions as possible or as much revenue as possible. So, with that thinking in mind, it's like, okay, you're at a 300 ROAS and you want to get to a 7. I think like what I would do is probably increase it incrementally, go from 300 to 350, watch what happens. Does the spend slow down? Does it improve? And that might take a week or two, depending on how much volume is going through your campaign. So, kind of move the needle slowly so that you don't shock the system. I think the biggest thing to keep in mind with any performance max or smart bidding campaign is don't make super drastic changes because you'll just throw the whole thing off course.
That makes sense. Yeah, I think people panic and they'll just triple the ROAS target or switch bidding too often, go back to manual, go back to maximize something, and just
Right.
it doesn't have time. The system doesn't have time to figure out, because automated bidding can work very well, but it takes time to do it. It's not a couple of days. It
Right.
may not even be a week or two.
Yeah, and it's definitely important not to be too reactive with any marketing, but especially Google Ads, because if you make changes too quickly based on incomplete data, it's gonna really knock it off base.
Yeah, definitely. And just kind of switching subjects here, we'll make sure we get to demand gen. Where does that fit in? How does that fit in? It's not quite Performance Max, but it's this automated show
Right.
you in a bunch of places. It was Discovery, now not really. I guess it's upgraded Discovery, sort of.
Yeah. So I think like from a placement perspective, it's very similar to Performance Max, except it doesn't have like search and shopping. So it's all the, it's got YouTube, YouTube Shorts, the side of YouTube, like the thumbnail and the picture. It's got Discovery, Gmail. So it's got all those placements. But from what we've seen so far in our testing is that Performance Max is much more conversion focused. If you look at the bid strategies available and everything Google says about it, it is full funnel. It does do a lot of prospecting and retargeting and search and shopping in between, but it's very conversion focused, very performance focused, whereas demand gen is a lot more true upper funnel, creating demand, like literally generating demand. And so to that end, I don't ever expect it to perform in the same way as shopping or Performance Max, but once you've already maxed out, you're doing search, you're doing shopping, you're doing Performance Max, you're doing Facebook and Instagram. It's a great way to like build on top of it and fill the funnel and introduce new customers to whatever you're selling.
So you'd say kind of add it later. Do you do a small
Yeah.
percentage to just kind of fill up the funnel and kind of add to what you're already doing?
Yeah, that's how I would approach it right now. I'm sure that'll evolve over time, as it becomes more sophisticated, but from what I've seen so far, like it does not perform in the same way as let's say Facebook and Instagram ads, even though it's very similar. But it definitely works. We see conversions coming in. It's just typically a lower ROAS or a higher CPA at this current stage.
And would you test a different landing page? Maybe go for micro conversions, just grab an email or they watched a video or
Yeah,
something like that.
yeah, definitely. I mean, in general, you do want to have different landing pages for, more pure upper funnel types of campaigns. So, that's something that I would recommend there too, is just kind of pull people into your funnel and you'll get them back. You'll get them with your email flows. You'll get them with your retargeting. They might come back, search for your brand, to search for another keyword later on. So, that's really what it's about.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, just kind of seems like there's all these adjustments. I mean, how can people shift over to older campaigns? Maybe they have the shopping, maybe they standard shopping, and then what strategies for shifting over and using the new tools in 2024, but not Google taking all your money for it to learn, not for you to keep profiting.
Yeah, I mean, so if you have an existing account with a lot of conversion data, when you launch a Performance Max campaign, it's a lot easier for the system to hit the ground running because it already knows what's driving conversions for your business. So in those cases, like if you're using standard shopping and it's working well, I would say, don't just knock it all down and start with Performance Max. Maybe take segments out of it and you can come at it from a couple of different ways. You can say like, okay, what are the top performing products? Let me move them in Performance Max and see if I can really scale it. Or you can do the flip side, is like which products are not getting much traction inside of shopping. Let me take those out and put them in Performance Max and see what it can do. So, kind of leaving some in shopping and building Performance Max on top. I think the tricky piece though is when you set up Performance Max, it automatically takes precedence over shopping. So you have to make
Yeah.
sure that some product segments are excluded and can fall back into the shopping campaigns.
Yeah, that's huge. Not just setting both of them. They usually don't do well when they just fight against each other and they both have the same things in them.
Yeah, if you have the same products in Performance Max and shopping will barely serve. Performance Max will always take precedence.
Yeah, that makes sense. Switching that up, and then for search, I mean, if you have phrase and exact, and I mean, probably not manual bidding. I'm guessing a lot of people switched off of that, but just how would you shift into testing some broad match? Don't just drop in 100 broad match, and then test shifting over to
Yeah.
auto bidding. What's a safe switch over to that?
Yeah, so like what we've seen and what we typically follow is like launching with manual bids and phrase and exact match keywords, then watching the search impression share. As you get close to like 70, 80% search impression share, it means you're showing up most of the time. There's the trade-off to bidding higher starts to fall off. It's not really worth it. At those stages, we'll start to add the best performing keywords as broad match and simultaneously switching to like smart bidding, like target CPA. And if you feel uncomfortable doing that, Google has a very cool experiments feature where you can test, half your traffic on smart bidding and half on manual bidding and kind of see which one does better. Again, with lead gen, you got to be careful what kind of traffic you get from broad match. So you got to really stay on top of the negative keywords. But again, it's always best if you could connect your CRM. And so you can see real revenue, like what's coming from which keywords, and then bid based on that. But that's typically like our basic roadmap to get, from a basic manual campaign to a more automated, smart bidding broad match type of search campaign.
Yeah, and kind of adding to that, we've found one connecting the CRM that's good for forms, but the calls have a lot of that built in already. Even
Yeah,
Google calls from ads, you can drop in, at least 30 seconds or at least 2 minutes.
right,
Don't do 20 minutes like it has to close a sale, but
right,
just filter out the auto dials, the wrong numbers. You can do one
right.
minute. Something
Yeah,
like
well, I
that.
think
And call tracking will
one
do that too. Call rail, call
for
tracking
sure.
metrics through 1 minute. Just filter out all the junk at least.
For sure. That's definitely always recommended. And something else you could do is if you don't even have a CRM, which some people don't, but you are using a tool like CallRail, you can actually score the phone calls
Yeah.
in CallRail and send that data back to Google Ads. So that could be helpful. But I think the other thing I like to do, once you've maxed out your search impression share, is layer on Performance Max on top of it. But it's important when doing that to understand how the two play together because Performance Max will always take precedence unless the exact keyword the person searched for sits inside your search campaign. So, typically we talk about condensing accounts. You don't need very small keyword sets, but if you're launching Performance Max on top of it, you kind of need a lot of keywords in the search campaign because irrespective of match type, if the keyword the user searched for doesn't sit in one of your search campaigns, PMax will grab it.
Yeah, and we've seen that. We did that on a different one. It was Performance Max for lower budgets, small companies. It is actually
Right,
a web design company, which is extremely competitive, high
right,
CPCs, kind of that agency world. They did, it was $20 a day, Performance Max for lead gen, focused on their city only. And they just knew about 60% of it's going to be garbage, but the cost per
right.
lead
But get
was
some good ones.
so cheap using kind of I don't want to say a hack, but a trick for Performance Max. And there's even in market for I think it's SEO, SEM, or marketing
Right,
services. There's an in market that's that exact thing. Maybe even web
right,
design. I'd have to look at them again. Or a custom audience. It's like you can do tricks for lower budgets. It's not
right.
you have to tell your team most of these are going to be junk, but looking
Yeah,
at the CPA and the ROAS from a lead gen point of view, you can do Performance Max for lead gen as well. Just know that not all of it's going to be great. There's all kinds of
right.
adjustments you can make, and I think people need to just keep that in mind going into 2024. Use the new tools cautiously. Keep an eye
Exactly,
on them, but still
exactly,
use them.
exactly. Yeah, I think that one of the biggest things about Performance Max is that people believe it's easy to set up and it just set it and forget it. And it's really not the case. Like there's 1,000 different ways to set it up, and there's so many different things you can do to optimize it. And so, that's the goal is to help people see, the full potential of what it could do.
Yeah, yeah. Keep testing the new stuff, even a small budget, and watch it extremely closely. The opposite of what Google says to do.
Right,
It's not magic AI, and AI is not magic. It's like a
right.
factory. You have to watch all your machines, make sure they're not, they're
Exactly.
working properly. But
Exactly.
yeah, I think that's a lot of great strategies going into 2024. Google Ads has so many new things, and appreciate you coming on the show and
Yeah.
explaining how specifically to use them and get a strategy. Anything else we didn't cover that you want to make sure to get into?
No, I think that's pretty much it. I think that the message I like to leave people with is just have an open mind and have patience. Try it, figure it out, and just make it happen.
Yeah, have a separate test budget too. Don't go all in
Yeah,
and run it into
yeah,
the ground. But yeah, thanks so much. I
for
mean,
sure.
awesome insights going forward. How can people find you and follow you and reach out to you?
Sure, you can find me. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on X, Twitter, or you can visit our website, jxtgroup.com. Always happy to answer questions.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll put links down in the description below. So thanks so much for your insights. Really appreciate it.
Sure. Thank you so much for having
All
me.
right, have a good one. Bye.
You too. Bye now.